Carrying the nukes. You love having the power of God at your fingertips.
Not tonight, buddy.
We got pilots down.
We got ourselves a broken arrow.
A broken what? It's what we call it when we lose a nuclear weapon.
Broken Arrow arrives as a pure 1990s action spectacle, a film that wears its era proudly and leans hard into the anxieties and adrenaline of post-Cold War America. It takes the idea of nuclear catastrophe, once framed around superpower standoffs and shadowy governments, and distills it into something more personal and volatile, a battle of wills between two men who know each other's strengths, weaknesses, and limits. The premise immediately signals the stakes. Two nuclear warheads vanished during a covert military mission, and what should have been a controlled operation becomes a nightmare unfolding in the vast emptiness of the Utah desert. From the opening moments, the film establishes speed and urgency, driven not by mystery, but by inevitability, as if disaster is always just one bad decision away. The story hinges on a secret test flight involving a cutting-edge stealth bomber carrying live nuclear weapons, referred to in military slang as broken arrows, once they are lost or compromised. This terminology alone grounds the film in a cold, procedural realism that contrasts sharply with the operatic action that follows. The crash in the desert is not just an accident, it is the spark that reveals betrayal at the highest level. One of the pilots has engineered the entire event, turning a routine mission into the opening move of a nuclear extortion scheme. The film wastes little time in showing that this is not a faceless conspiracy, but a deeply personal conflict built on rivalry, ego, and opposing philosophies about power and control. John Travolta's antagonist is the engine that drives the film's energy. His performance is unapologetically theatrical, leaning into charm, menace, and dark humor with equal enthusiasm. This is not a quiet or restrained villain. He is loud, confident, and visibly enjoying the chaos he creates. The character believes in dominance, in the idea that the world responds only to force, and that nuclear weapons represent the ultimate leverage. Travolta plays him as someone who feels intellectually superior, a man who sees rules and institutions as obstacles rather than safeguards. Every line delivery and gesture reinforces the sense that he is always performing, always testing how far he can push others before they break. Christian Slater's hero serves as a deliberate counterpoint. Where the villain is flamboyant and self-assured, the protagonist is reactive, grounded, and defined by responsibility rather than ambition. He is not driven by ideology, but by duty and instinct, a pilot who suddenly finds himself outmatched not just by circumstances, but by someone who knows how he thinks. The film positions him as an everyman soldier caught in an extraordinary crisis, relying on persistence rather than brilliance. This dynamic creates a tension that feels more intimate than the usual action movie conflict. It is not simply good versus evil, it's restraint versus excess, loyalty versus ego. The desert setting plays a crucial role in shaping the film's atmosphere. Wide, empty landscapes stretch endlessly, emphasizing isolation and vulnerability. There's no city skyline to hide behind, no crowds to disappear into. Everything happens under open skies, where explosions echo across barren rock formations, and every mistake feels amplified. The Utah desert becomes a character in its own right, both beautiful and unforgiving, offering moments of calm that are repeatedly shattered by violence. This choice of location reinforces the film's themes of exposure and consequence, stripping the conflict down to its essentials. As the plot unfolds, the extortion plan becomes clear. The stolen warheads are not meant to be launched, but used as threats, weapons of fear designed to bend governments to one man's will. This reflects a shift in how nuclear danger is portrayed. Instead of massive ideological wars, the threat comes from individual greed and disillusionment. The villain does not claim to be saving the world or correcting injustice. He wants money, power, and recognition. This blunt motivation makes him more unsettling because it suggests that the most devastating weapons ever created can be exploited by simple human corruption. The action sequences are staged with a kinetic, almost musical rhythm. Explosions are frequent and exaggerated, gunfights are loud and chaotic, and the film rarely pauses to catch its breath. Helicopters skim low over rocky terrain, trains become instruments of destruction, and vehicles crash with operatic flair. The choreography prioritizes momentum over realism, embracing spectacle as the primary language of the film. This approach aligns perfectly with the director's style, which favors bold visuals, sweeping camera movements, and a heightened sense of drama. One of the film's most memorable aspects is its use of music to amplify tension. The score pulses with energy, blending electronic beats and orchestral flourishes to create a sense of relentless forward motion. Rather than fading into the background, the music asserts itself, pushing scenes toward crescendo after crescendo. It reinforces the idea that this is not a slow burn thriller, but an adrenaline-fueled race against time, where every second counts and silence itself feels dangerous. The supporting characters, while not deeply explored, serve functional and thematic purposes. A park ranger unexpectedly drawn into the conflict adds a civilian perspective, reminding the audience that nuclear threats do not exist in abstract political spaces, but in real environments where ordinary people live and work. Military officials represent the institutional response, efficient yet often constrained by protocol and distance. These elements highlight the contrast between centralized authority and individual action, suggesting that when systems fail, outcomes depend on personal choices. Dialogue in the film oscillates between sharp, memorable one-liners and straightforward exposition. The villain's speeches often border on philosophical monologues, expressing disdain for weakness and bureaucracy, while the hero's lines are more pragmatic, focused on immediate survival and damage control. This imbalance is intentional, allowing the antagonist to dominate conversations and reinforce his sense of control. At the same time, it underscores the hero's role as someone who acts rather than preaches, whose morality is defined by decisions under pressure rather than words. The film's pacing is relentless, structured around escalating confrontations that steadily narrow the distance between hunter and hunted. Early sequences emphasize confusion and shock as the scale of betrayal becomes clear. Midway through, the narrative settles into a mouse and chase across the desert, punctuated by explosions and narrow escapes. By the final act, the story becomes almost mythic in its simplicity, reducing the conflicts to a direct showdown where ideology, strategy, and ego collide head-on. Broken Arrow also reflects the cultural mood of its time, when action films frequently explored the collapse of trust within institutions. The idea that a highly trained military officer could turn against his own country resonated with fears about insider threats and the misuse of advanced technology. The stealth bomber itself symbolizes this anxiety, a marvel of engineering that becomes irrelevant once human intentions turn malicious. The film suggests that technology alone cannot guarantee security. It merely amplifies the consequences of human failure. Visually, the movie leans into high contrast and bold compositions. Sun-bleached landscapes clash with the dark interiors of military aircraft, while fireballs erupt against clear blue skies. The cinematography emphasizes scale, making explosions feel enormous and characters feel small by comparison. This visual language reinforces the imbalance of power inherent in nuclear weapons, tools so destructive that they dwarf individual lives and moral considerations. The rivalry at the heart of the film is ultimately what gives it staying power. The villain's obsession with dominance is mirrored by the hero's refusal to surrender, creating a feedback loop of escalation. Each encounter pushes them further, stripping away allies, resources, and pretenses until only raw will remains. This progression gives the climax emotional weight beyond simple spectacle, framing it as the inevitable outcome of two incompatible worldviews colliding. In the end, Broken Arrow is less concerned with realism than with momentum and impact. It embraces exaggeration, larger-than-life performances, and explosive set pieces to deliver a visceral experience. Its portrayal of nuclear danger may be simplified, but its underlying message is clear. The most terrifying threats often come not from distant enemies, but from those entrusted with power. By centering its conflict on betrayal, ego, and responsibility, the film transforms a high-concept premise into a personal battle that feels immediate and intense. As a long-form action discussion, the movie stands as a snapshot of 1990s blockbuster filmmaking, when practical effects, bold musical scores, and charismatic villains dominated the genre. It may not delve deeply into political nuance, but it understands the value of clarity and speed, delivering a story that moves with purpose and confidence. Broken Arrow remains memorable not because it redefined action cinema, but because it executed its formula with conviction, style, and a sense of unrestrained energy that still resonates with audiences who appreciate cinematic excess driven by strong character conflict.